hello. How is everybody doing today? Pretty good conference, right? Thank you so much for having me. As the voice of God just informed you, my name is Liz Wheeler. I host The Liz Wheeler Show. A huge thank you to Ryan for putting this conference together. That's right, give him a round of applause. To the Freedom Center, I mean, this is incredible for a conference for the first time, and of course to Liberty University. But most of all, thank you to each and every one of you for giving up your weekend and coming out to this great community of Christians and conservatives committed to the Constitution of the United States and to the Judeo-Christian principles that make our country great. So thank you for being here. I am here tonight, or today, it's not night, I am here today to talk to you specifically not just as conservatives, but as Christian conservatives, to answer a question that I'm asked very frequently when I talk about the transgender topic. The question is, do you have to use the transgender pronouns when you are talking to a transgender person as a Christian and as a conservative? Are you required to use the pronouns that someone chooses versus the pronouns that correspond with their sex, their biological gender? What should a Christian conservative do in this situation? And I think most of us have probably faced this situation before, and on the one hand, we want to be kind, we want to be compassionate. These are people suffering from gender dysphoria. We don't want to be needlessly mean, we don't want to hurt them. On the other hand, we have reality. So how do we weigh this? How do we weigh this? Well, the good news, in answer to this question, the good news is that the question itself actually isn't a very good question. The question itself is moot. When do you ever use the pronouns of the person that you are addressing? Hello, Bob, how are you? Or in a conversation, what do you want to eat for dinner? You actually never use the pronouns of the person. This is a false choice that's given to us. It's posed by the left to us in an effort to try to expose us as being deliberately mean as Christians and conservatives to people that are suffering from gender dysphoria. So don't fall for it. It's not a real question. It's a question that's just used to trap us. As for the choice of names, you know, what do you call someone if they're a boy and they want to be called by a girl name? Well, here's what I would say. A lot of people have weird names. I actually feel a lot weirder calling a celebrity kid Apple, because an apple is a fruit. I don't really care if you're a man who calls himself Rachel. It's not a good name for you as a man, but a lot of people have dumb names. I do, however, care about reality. As Christians and as conservatives, because we care about reality, because we understand that there is objective truth, and that the author of objective truth is God, then we must, as Christians and conservatives, destroy the transgender agenda. Why? Because it is a dangerous lie. So today I want to talk to you about why, as conservatives and as Christian conservatives specifically, we must reject the transgender ideology. And I want to make a distinction here. There's a big difference between destroying a person and destroying an ideology. So when I say we must destroy the transgender ideology, I still mean that we should treat people suffering from gender dysphoria with dignity and respect. They are children of the King. We're not trying to destroy them as people. We are trying to destroy an ideology which is exploiting them as children of the King. It's our responsibility. This is an uncomfortable topic for a lot of conservatives and Christians because it is anti-biblical, because it has to do with deviant sexual activity. But we have a responsibility nonetheless to fight this fight, because if we don't, who's going to? As I said, it's a dangerous lie. Just here in Virginia, we saw the ramifications of the transgender agenda. This summer, a 9th grade girl, a freshman in Loudoun County, was raped in the bathroom, a gender-neutral bathroom, by a boy wearing a skirt. And the school and the school district and the school board covered up this rape. They hid it. These are the same people, by the way, that claim to support the Me Too, the Believe All Women movement. They hid this rape. They covered it up. They called the police on her father, who was irate that she had been raped, versus on the rapist. The rapist they allowed to go back to school where he sexually assaulted someone else. Why did they hide that? They hid it because they knew that it contradicts their transgender ideology, the ideology that claims that women and girls are perfectly safe, that having a gender-neutral bathroom doesn't pose them any physical risk. You and I know that that's false. The transgender ideology is dangerous to women and girls. Do you guys remember the story of James Younger in Texas? James Younger is a 7-year-old boy whose mother claims that he is transgender. She calls him Luna, whose father says that no, he's not transgender at all. In fact, the father says that the mother has groomed him to be transgender, that she has, since he was 3 years old, told him that he was a girl, and actually manipulated him and abused him in order to form him into what she wanted him to be. She withholds love. She tells him that monsters eat little boys. She dresses him only in dresses and bows. And the father took a video of the child saying that, "Mommy told me I'm a girl." The court in Texas removed custody of James Younger from his father. This father lost his child. In fact, if he wants visitation rights with his child, he has to pay for the transition of this child. And what's worse, the mother said that she wants to put this child on puberty-blocking hormones. Do you know what puberty-blocking hormones actually are? They're a pharmaceutical drug that previously in our country was used to chemically castrate convicted sex offenders. It is not FDA approved for children. It is certainly not FDA approved for children with gender dysphoria. It chemically castrates the children. And this is horrendous to hear. It's graphic to hear. But if you and I, as conservatives and as Christian conservatives, do not stand up for these children, then who will? Because the transgender agenda is child abuse, plain and simple. It's also anti-science. Did you know the doctor at Johns Hopkins University who invented the, whatever you want to call it, the transgender surgery, did you know he won't perform the surgery anymore? Because he knows that it's not curative. He knows that gender dysphoria is a mental disorder as it's categorized in the medical community. That's not something that I'm saying, that's not my opinion. That's medical fact. He won't perform it anymore because he knows it's not curative. He knows that gender dysphoria is most times a comorbidity, meaning that there is another psychiatric disorder that comes hand in hand that triggers this mental state. Certainly for children, 80 to 95% of children who suffer from gender dysphoria will recover from it by the time they're adults if they are not socially transitioned or medically transitioned. The transgender ideology is anti-science, and if you and I as Christians and conservatives do not stand up against this, 10 years from now, 15 years from now, 20 years from now, we're not going to be able to fight back because this is going to be deeply ingrained into the fiber of our nation. We are called to stand up for reality. We are called to stand up for those who don't have a voice, and who better as an example of someone who doesn't have a voice than a child who's being abused? The transgender ideology also erases real women. Of course. I mean, did you guys watch the Olympics this summer? You saw the weightlifter from New Zealand, Laurel Hubbard, who's actually a man. I know she didn't win, and those on the transgender left are saying, well, she didn't take a medal away from any woman. No, she didn't. She sucked as a male athlete and also sucked as a female athlete. But she did take a spot on the Olympic team from a real woman. So there were real women in New Zealand who had worked their entire life to earn this spot, and they were left behind because a man took their spot. This is not transphobic to point this out. Quite the opposite. This is actually being an advocate for women to defend real women and to say, listen, we feel compassion for you that you have gender dysphoria. You can choose to live your life any way that you choose. That's one of the downsides of liberty. But we're not going to pretend that it's for the good of the society, for the good of you, or for the good of women. It's also, by the way, the transgender ideology is not about tolerance and inclusion, as they claim. It's actually speech control. So in my home state of Ohio, there was a 6th grade boy who was sent to the principal's office, and he was threatened with suspension from school for bullying. They said he was a bully, because he said during a discussion in class, this was an academic discussion, he said there were only 2 genders. A student in Indiana, at the Indiana University of Pennsylvania, was kicked out of class for a whole semester for the same thing. This prevented him from graduating on time. Does this sound like tolerance? Does this sound like inclusion? Of course it doesn't, because it's not. It's thought control, it's speech control. I hate to use all these negative examples from my lovely home state, but in Cincinnati, there's a 17-year-old girl who suffers from gender dysphoria, and her parents recognized that she had comorbidities, that she had severe mental illness, And so when she wanted to transition to a boy, they said, no, you know what, you're 17 years old. You can wait until you're 18 and that you have agency over your own decisions. You can wait until you're out of our house to do that. The court removed this girl from the custody of her parents because she threatened to commit suicide and gave her to the custody of people who will facilitate her transition. The transgender ideology is not looking in the interest of this young girl. The transgender ideology is an assault on parental rights. That's why, even if this is uncomfortable, even if it's graphic, as conservatives, and especially as Christian conservatives, we have a duty, a responsibility to speak up and defend reality, because reality is what is under assault here. Reality is what is under assault. Every generation in our nation for the past 50, 60 years has faced one of these I call social, sexual, cultural crises. And each generation of Christians and conservatives have fought, but oftentimes we have not fought strongly enough. And we can go through these. In the 1960s was the sexual revolution, obviously, the advent of birth control, the idea of free love. If it feels good, do it. Conservatives and Christians did not put a stop to that and look at what was begot of it. In the 1970s, it was abortion. Do whatever you want, and the ramifications of it, just get rid of it at the doctor's office. Conservatives fought against this, but we didn't fight hard enough. In the 1980s, no-fault divorce. Look at what happens to our nation when the family breaks down. Society becomes degraded. The family unit is the underpinning of our nation. Conservatives fought back against this, but we didn't fight hard enough. In the 1990s, the proliferation of online pornography. Talk about an assault on men. Talk about an assault on fathers, on husbands. The linchpin of the family. Conservatives fought back against this, but we didn't fight strong enough. In the 2000s, it was the hookup culture. At every college besides probably here at Liberty University, students were encouraged, if you want to be liberated, if you want to explore yourself, if you want to find yourself, then you must engage in promiscuous sex. Conservatives barely made a blip. I'm not even sure that conservatives, as a party, as a movement, fought back against this. In the 2010s, it was gay marriage. There was a tiny fraction of conservatives, mostly religious, who fought back against this, but we didn't fight back against it, and look at what happened. Again, the degradation of the family unit. And now, 2021, you and I, as conservatives and Christians, we're facing another social, sexual, cultural crisis, the transgender ideology. It's not just about being kind to people who suffer from gender dysphoria. Of course we should be kind. Of course we should be compassionate. But what is love? What does God tell us about love? Love is not defined as simply being nice. Love is not defined as indulging somebody's delusions. No, love is defined, yes, as being kind. But we as Christians are called to defend reality. And so I charge you tonight, I challenge you tonight, do not be afraid of the reaction from the left when you fight this fight. People are afraid of being called a bigot. But if you and I do not stand up, if you and I do not speak out, if you and I do not become the voice for the voiceless, then children will be abused. The medical community will be weaponized. Parents will lose their kids. Biological women will become obsolete. Religious people's rights will be trampled. Delusion will be codified into law. Free speech will be stifled. Regret of surgeries, of transgender surgeries, will be ignored. 11%, by the way, of women who have this surgery regret it to the point, not just that they regret it, but that they actually detransition. But the transgender ideology ignores this. Science will be irrevocably damaged, and objective truth will be obliterated. And the result, of course, will be a government so big and so powerful that they can control our entire lives, including a complete abolition of our religious liberty as Christians and conservatives. If you and I don't fight back, my friends, then who will? Thank you so much.